Hello, my name is Sammy Mian, and today I'll be teaching you about lab safety. What is lab safety? That is the question I'll be answering throughout this video. But before we get started, let's run down all the labs you'll see. Never assume. This is a crucial lab safety rule. No matter what, make sure you know what's on the surface. Always clean your area after you have done a lab or spilled some chemical. And whenever you have time, clean your hands. If not clean your hands, you have to clean your hands. And mold, it's a deadly killer. Some people are allergic to it, so be careful. Always keep the floor clean during the lab. And never eat off of the lab table, no matter what. Back to our first lab safety rule, you should never assume you know what liquid is on the table. Looks can be very deceiving during a lab. As you can see here, a student has accidentally dropped baking soda onto the table. Not only is this a fail, but a hazard as well. The liquid on the right was harmless water and the left vinegar. You couldn't tell them apart, and this is exactly why you should never assume you know what is on the surface of a table during a lab. If the two chemicals had made methane, a odorless gas, instead it would have led to headaches, difficulty concentrating, and heart palpitations, and ultimately death. As you can see here, you can't tell what kind of liquid this is until the baking powder is poured onto it, and it is then you can clearly see the reaction taking place and the bubbles being formed. This could cause a deadly reaction, but thankfully it was just baking soda. Now let's see what happens when a student does not follow this rule. The student here has just made a huge mistake. He assumed the liquid within the cup was water, but it was in fact vinegar and baking soda. His whole dialysis tubing lab has been ruined. Moving on to the second lab safety rule, you should always ask a teacher before cleaning your lab area. Whoever conducted their lab last here has left the area a mess. There is dirt all over the area and what looks to be a sticky substance as well. Residue from the lab has dried up and left crusty spots all around. The student asked the teacher how he should go about cleaning this mess before doing so, and whether it was safe to clean the area in the first place. The reaction seen in the last safety rule could have been avoided had someone just cleaned up after them. Not cleaning your lab area not only puts others in harm's way, but could lead to a point deduction from one of your IB biology points. 6 of your points are determined by what Mr. Wells thinks of you as a student overall. People who leave behind messy labs are not respectful students, and therefore would have a point deducted. You should always leave the lab area better than you found it and encourage others to do the same. And this brings us to our third lab safety rule, which is always to wash your hands. And as you can see, the student is washing his hands after interacting with chemicals, and you should always do this after any lab, period, no matter what you touched or didn't touch. Always use soap and methodically clean your hands. The back of your hands are just as important as the front, so do not forget to clean them. Try to clean the tips of your nails, as this is the very spot copious amounts of dirt and bacteria can hide. This will sound silly and dumb, but you should sing your ABCs as you clean, as this is about the amount of time you should spend. As you can see, in the process of washing his hands, another student rudely knocked over some containers. Even though it was not the fault of the student washing his hands, he still cleaned up after the other student. Mold, the deadly killer. Your lab might create mold, and this can be a very scary and dangerous scenario. The plants have begun growing mold on them. This is the white substance that coats the sprouting seed, as you can see here. Many students are allergic to mold, and it is very dangerous overall. Mold spread by tiny airborne spores that act like tiny seeds and only need a tepid environment, moisture, and a food source to germinate, which is why the average lab is a perfect mold environment. Some mold will produce toxins called mycotoxins in order to inhibit the growth of competitive organisms. The problem with mycotoxins is that molds enjoy the same environment that people do, and because of this, the humans are exposed to more dangerous mycotoxins than they may realize. It is nearly impossible to destroy mycotoxins. The digestive system cannot break them down, and temperature treatments like heating them or freezing them do not affect them. This is why mycotoxins are one of the primary causes of foodborne illness, or even worse, diarrhea and death. This brings us to our next rule, which is to always keep the floor clean of liquids, dirt, or other slippery material, as this is a hazard to not only other students but yourself. Slipping and falling could break expensive material, and even worse, a bone in your body. A student has just stepped into a puddle of mud. He could slip and fall into the very important rack of plants to his right. These plants are 1/8 of not just his, but his fellow students' IB grade. Come to our last safety rule. You should never eat off of the table. This seems like a common sense rule, but it could save your life. You have no idea what could have been on the table before you came. Here we see the results of not following the rules. The student has just eaten a mint after dropping it on the table and got an instantaneous food poisoning. Don't let this be you. Worst scenario, you could get diarrhea, which occurs worldwide and causes 4% of all deaths and 5% of health loss to disability. And now we've come to our general lab safety rules. The first one has to do with chemicals. Never touch or interact with harmful chemicals unless you have protective gloves on. The chemicals shown here could cause burns, peeling of the skin, irritation, or death if mixed together. They should never be mixed together for this reason, and to prevent this, never use the same pipette for more than one solution unless it has been thoroughly washed with soap. You should always be aware of your surroundings in the lab at all times. You might have left your beam balance unplugged like a student did here and left for a few seconds to do something, but this is just long enough for someone to get hurt. A student could have tripped here and not just injured themselves, but the equipment as well. This applies to everybody in the lab, not just the students or the teacher. Anybody walking in should also be aware. This brings us to our last lab safety rule: be courteous. The student here refuses to clean up a fellow student's mess since it's not his own. You should be courteous during a lab since everyone's grades are on the line. Leaving a messy lab will have points deducted from everyone's IB biology grade, not just the student who left the mess. Helping clean up benefits everyone, not just you. So don't be conceited, be courteous. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you learned something about lab safety from this video. I want to thank Mr. Wells for providing me the equipment for the lab and taking precious time out of his schedule, as well as giving me a place to shoot this lab, and Arturo Rojas for being an amazing actor and friend. Have a safe lab, guys, and as always, this has been Sammy.